Hey there, Goblin Army. Here we are again at the beginning of my work week, and the beginning of my YouTube week with a great movie review. It's the beginning of the Lunar New Year this week, and I've got a very fitting review for you, my goblins. Definitely one of my favorite films, and one of those films that has influenced me throughout my many annoying years on this planet. Definitely sparked an interest and love for ancient Chinese culture, mythology, and folklore, which has had its own influence on various projects of mine over the years. So, without further ado, the film we're talking about this week is Big Trouble in Little China. The film is a John Carpenter film, who, of course, is most famous for horror films like Halloween, The Thing, Village of the Damned, and Vampires. However, he has done other sorts of films like Escape from New York and Escape from LA, both of which, like this film, were with Kurt Russell. So this film is a weird sort of fusion between action, comedy, kung fu, mythology, and, I suppose, a bit of horror. It follows Jack Burton, a blustery truck driver portrayed by Kurt Russell. Jack Burton is your typical blue-collar, all-American guy in the 80s who comes face-to-face with horrors and events right out of Chinese legend in the American city of San Francisco. No, not that San Francisco. The Bay before it went to complete shit. Yeah, there we go. Everything starts when Jack wins a bet with his friend, Wang, played by Dennis Dunn. In order to make sure Wang pays up, Jack accompanies him to the airport to pick up his fiancée, Miao Yin, who's just arrived from China. She ends up being kidnapped by the Lords of Death, a supposedly vicious Chinese street gang. When Jack and Wang chase them down to their hideout to get Miao Yin back, they get in the middle of a street fight between two rival tongs and wind up coming face to face with the Three Storms, who are Chinese sorcerers and martial artists, and David Lo Pan, a mysterious Chinese businessman whom nobody has ever seen in person. Through a lawyer, Gracie Law, yeah, I thought that was goofy too, the duo discover that Miao Yin has been sold to a local brothel where she will command a high price due to her rare, amongst Chinese people, green eyes. However, before they can rescue her, through a very comedic performance by Kurt Russell, she is taken by the Storms. The Storms are, of course, under the command of Lo Pan, played by James Hong. I love James Hong, who has sought her out in order to break a curse he is under that, in essence, has made him a hungry ghost since the time of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi. One thing I'll say about the Three Storms, I'm pretty sure I've seen at least one or two of them in something else, for one. However, what I really want to say is that, look at these costumes. Keep in mind that this movie came out in 1986. If someone were to tell me that the Raiden design from Mortal Kombat was inspired by these guys, I'd totally believe it. I mean, one of them even uses lightning, both as an attack and to travel around. The rest of the film follows Jack and his friends, including the sorcerer Egg Shen, played by Victor Wong. I love that guy too. As they move through the underworld of San Francisco's Chinatown to fight villains both real and legendary in their attempt to save Miao Yin and Jack's rig, which was abandoned in the initial gang fight. One thing you have to remember about this film is that it is extraordinarily goofy. It really is. Much like with the anime review I did last week, at no point does this movie attempt to take itself too seriously, or seriously at all. Everything from the fight choreography to the dialogue is delivered with this very tongue-in-cheek way that makes even the most ridiculous stuff a joy to watch. Jack Burton is played superbly by Kurt Russell. He's a blustery blowhard who takes the stereotypical American bravado up to 11. From his actual swagger, to the way he fights, to his sense of style, to his line delivery, and how he has a penchant for talking about himself in the third person, is all done in a way to overly exaggerate his Americanness. He confronts the weirdness that begins to assert itself into his life with that typical American bravado. Kurt Russell was the perfect person to play him, in my opinion. His friend Wang is basically the exact opposite in nearly every way. He's a first-generation immigrant, though his English is perfect and without a trace of accent, funnily enough. An accomplished martial artist, he's small and quick, both in mind and body. He acts as a sort of bridge for Jack with the more unusual Chinese elements of the film. In essence, sort of trapped between two worlds. The mysticism and traditional values of his birthplace, and the more mundane, everyday existence in the States. Gracie acts more as an interpreter and a sort of info dump for the audience. A forever outsider among her chosen community, knowing just enough to get her into trouble. She's also the obligatory love interest. Egg Shen is a Taoist sorcerer whose day job is a tour bus driver. He acts as a sort of Merlin for the group. A guy who knows how to counteract the more fantastical elements and can go head to head with their enemy. Some of you who are around my age would probably recognize him from the Three Ninjas film series, at least the first two. I'm not sure about any of the others that came out, since I never watched them. As I said, David Lopan is played phenomenally by James Hong. I've always loved this guy. I just love the way he speaks, for one. He has this it's hard to put into words, a very elegant way about him. The way he carries himself, the way he speaks. I've honestly had RPG characters that I've legit based on him. Trying to use the way he speaks and the way he enunciates his words, It's funny because when I do that, people have immediately caught on to who I was trying to portray. He's a pretty iconic guy, I think. So yeah, this movie is very much over the top in pretty much every way imaginable. You can tell by watching that this movie was very much trying to tap into that sort of 70s kung fu aesthetic, with the overblown movements, sound effects, and damage done and taken. The scene that particularly comes to mind is the initial one when Jack and Wang accidentally get in the middle of the clash between the two Tongs. The fight scene that follows, it's really ridiculous but great. I'm trying to come up with a scene that might illustrate what I'm talking about. If you've seen that show Warrior on HBO Max, the one produced by Bruce Lee's daughter, there's those fights between the two Tongs in that show. Imagine that, then imagine it campy as fuck. Oh, and speaking of that, Al Leong was in this film too, because of course he was. Poor dude still had no fucking lines to speak of. Now, you might imagine the way I speak of this film that it's bad, or I'm dogging on it, or whatever. I assure you I'm not. This film is absolutely wonderful. The campiness is part of what makes it so awesome. It's honestly just a fun romp through a very thin slice of the big-ass pie that is Chinese mythology and culture. It's absolutely wonderful. As I said, it was at least in part what has inspired my love affair with East Asian culture throughout my life. I adore this film, and I encourage you to take a look at it if you've never seen it before. However, I think it's that time where I leave you all for now. Tell me what you thought in that handy section down below, while you're down there. Don't get lost in the hell of upside-down sinners, and remember to smash those like and subscribe buttons. I'll see you all tomorrow for what should be an interesting review. Lates.